All right. Peace, peace, peace. It's your brother Silent Sound tapping in with another episode of the Silent Conversations podcast. As always, we operate under peace, positivity, and perspective. And today we're going live. We're doing a live session of the podcast today. So you can catch us on Instagram. If you're watching on Instagram, you can also catch us on YouTube as well. The link is in the bio. Be sure to follow. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notifications. We tapping in today. We're bringing to light another conversation, another topic that is critical to personal development, self-development. One that is very touchy amongst our culture as well, especially those who may have not had the same advantages of others, those who have been put in situations that are a little less plentiful or abundant appearing. So today we tapping in and we're talking about trauma, and your development. Yes, trauma, drama, and your development. So to kind of break this up and how to break this down, what I want to start with is the definition. So when we look at the word trauma's definition is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. Emotional shock following a stressful event or a physical injury, which may be associated with physical shock or sometimes leads to long-term neurosis. So trauma is associated with was mostly associated with things in the past. Typically, we go through things that are traumatic in our past, which then directly affects our development today. Trauma has a very deep effect when it comes to our associations, our attachments, our habits, and our feelings towards people, relationships. Uh, when it comes to development, when you think about learning, the way you may have grown up and how you may have been taught or instructed on how you should learn may have been traumatic in the sense that when you're now in an older state or you've matured, it's now difficult for you to study. It's difficult for you to tap in and be able to develop yourself because you don't have that same desire or liking to wanting to get back into learning. So trauma can affect that. When it comes to relationships, when it comes to friendships, a lot of times, many of our relationships and friendships are directly tied to trauma. They call these things trauma bonds. We look at these situations that we go through. We look at the people that may be related to that situation or may have had a effect to us or an effect on us based off that traumatic situation. And then we then make a bond with them, or we make associations with certain events or certain topics. They then become triggers for us based off of traumatic situations that happened in our past, which then turns into how we look at our current state, what we do now, what we exercise now, what we use now in order to grow, or what we use now to not grow. A lot of times we look at personal development as something that may be intentional, but is very unintentional as well, in the sense that we grow every day. Either we're growing or contributing to our growth, or we're contributing to our stagnation, or we're contributing to our being in the same spot all the time. Many people make resolutions every year, but every year we come across, we're in the same position that we were 365 days before. So when we think about growth, when we think about development, we want that development to be in a steady incline. We want to always be evolving or growing or developing into a higher version of ourselves. That's one of the key reasons why I started this podcast. That's one of the key reasons why I started developing myself, is because I got to a point where I felt as if I was on a rat race, constantly doing these routine things, having these habits, having these routines that I traditions, I should say, that I had, but they never really brought to fruition the results that I was looking for. They never really brought to existence what I truly desired, or what I may have said out of my mouth. My actions didn't produce those results. So I had to look at what was I actually doing that was the same or that was different, that is causing the results that I get now. What do I need to adjust in order to get further into my advancement? So when you think about trauma, let's break this down as far as development is concerned. If when you were a child, there was a negative connotation towards learning or going to school or reading books or writing. If you, I know for me personally, as a child, penmanship, being my work being legible was very important for my father. So regardless of if the information was right or wrong, his first concern was, is it legible? So with that being said, if I presented my homework, if I had to write a paper or write an essay, do a report, and I would show him my work, if it wasn't legible, if the penmanship wasn't right, if I had a lot of scratch outs because I was using an ink pen, if I had a lot of eraser marks when I was using a pencil, he would ball it up and throw it away. At a certain point of my growth, I got to a point where I said, well, I'm not going to present it unless I knew it was presentable. I'm not going to bring this document, bring this report to my father if I knew that if I bring it to him and it was illegible, if there was a lot of scratch outs, a lot of mistakes, a lot of corrections on the paper, he was going to destroy it. And I knew what that felt like. I knew what it felt like when he balled it up in front of me and threw it away. As a child, I was like, man, this is harsh. As a child, I looked at it and I said, hey, he's hard on me. He's difficult to please. What am I doing wrong? I can't seem to get it right. Every time I present it, I know the answers are right, but he being picky about the legibility of it. I had to realize that he was actually refining me. He was actually taking me to another level in the sense that presentation was important. Keeping in mind that your first impression can be a lasting impression, whether it's good or bad. You can have bad things be reminded of you, or you can have good things be reminded of you. One thing that he taught me with that particular example is that if the work wasn't presentable, it automatically discredits what the potential of the answer could be. Though your answers may be right, if it's not presentable, the person that is grading it, the person that is seeking to see the answer when they see it, may not be able to get that answer, or they may not be able to decipher your handwriting in order to see your growth or see your potential or see your success. So the same thing goes today. A lot of times we go through traumatic situations and we look at them only for the traumatic side. We only look at them from the standpoint of what uh, negative results came of it. Oh, now I'm a little more self-aware or self-conscious of my decisions. I'm a little more self-conscious of the way I look. I'm a little more self-conscious about the way that I speak. But is that really a negative thing or is that a positive thing? It depends on how you look at it. Personally, I like to use my perspective to look at it from the positive. Yes, I can look at it as a form of weakness, but me personally, being that I take my time to write, has increased or made my penmanship that much better because I make sure that the presentation is there. Then when you get into a further state of your development, you look at it, well, if I build a legacy, I want my children to be able to read my notes, being able to refer back to my writings. That's something that they need to be able to read. If they're not able to read it, then how valuable is it really? The next thing that we look at as well is that trauma leads to coping mechanisms, pacifiers, self-identity crisis, warped perspectives, and fear. So let's start with the first one. Trauma leads to coping mechanisms. When we think about development, one of the main pillars that I use when it comes to development is reading. Reading is fundamental, as they say. So if we hold that true, if as a child reading wasn't comfortable for you, as an adult, reading isn't something that's going to be a desire of yours. But the answers to your questions may be behind a book. It may be behind pages that you need to turn, that you may need to read. If studying as a child when it was time to read in isolation was traumatic for you, then when you are in isolated situations now and you're required to do some reading or some studying in order to be valuable for the situation, you may not put forth your best foot forward. You may not put your best foot forward. So with that being said, we want to be sure to avoid leaning to these coping mechanisms. What does that mean? Not to bash this, but we can read a book, the paper book, or we can listen to the audio book. The difference between the two is that when you read the book, when you're turning the pages and you're reading the words, either you're reading them out loud or reading them in your mind, you're also increasing your vocabulary. Yes, some of us are a different type of learners. Some of us prefer to have audio. Some of us prefer to be visual. Some of us are hands-on. Some of us are social. Some of us are solitary. But studies show that as we continue to develop ourselves, if we try to learn different subjects different ways, have different styles of learning, if we challenge ourselves to, if we are naturally an auditory or an oral learner, then we may want to challenge ourselves to be visual. We may want to challenge ourselves to be hands-on, because whatever scenario that may present itself may cause you to have to step out of your traditional learning style or your natural learning style. But that doesn't mean that you want to stunt your growth because, oh, well, they're not feeding it to me the way that I wanted it fed to me. What I like to think about as well, especially when it comes to coping mechanisms, is it deals with being comfortable. A lot of times when we went through a traumatic situations, we do our best to avoid those situations. When we know we have a trigger, if we know we have certain things that affect us in a certain manner, then we try to avoid that. We try to get around that. So the best way to deal with it is to create a comfort zone. But growth doesn't happen in a comfort zone. Growth doesn't happen when everything is soft and cushy. Growth happens when there's adversity. Growth happens when there's opportunity to grow, where there's room to grow. If you have a plant with a small flower pot will only grow but so big. But eventually those roots need room to grow if it wants to continue to ascend. If it wants to continue to reach for the sun, it needs to spread its roots further. But if we continue to leave that plant restricted into that small pot, then the plant will do two things. Either it will be forced or put under a lot of stress to stay small, or it's going to die because there's not able to receive enough nutrients to support its growth. So where do you want to fall into this? Well, our mind can be that flower pot. Our life is what is growing, or the seed that is planted in that flower pot that we have to put action forth in order to bring it into existence. So what does that mean? We have to water it, we have to nurture it, but then we also have to expand that flower pot or expand our perspective so that we can widen our roots, so that we can ground ourselves in a better foundation, so that we can strengthen our ascension, strengthen our growth, strengthen our development. How do you know if the tree is good? You tell it by the fruit that it bears. So if you look at your results, if you look at the actions that you put forth, and then you see what results come from that, is your tree really healthy? Is your self-development really valuable to your success? Now, and that's not to say that success has anything to do with the monetary value. It has nothing to do with how much money you make, but it has everything to do with the time that you take in order to grow and become valuable. You can have all the valuable things, but if you're not valuable yourself, it really means nothing. You can have all the money in the world, but if you bring no value to the world, your money means nothing to them, because everyone can do that. Especially in this day and age, anyone can become a millionaire. Can become a billionaire. Anyone can start a business and blow up. Anyone can go viral. Anyone can become famous. Anyone can become the president. Anyone can become whatever it is that they want to do. But are you valuable at that? Are you an asset or are you a liability? Just because you hold the title doesn't guarantee that you garnish the value that comes with that, that you garnish the power that comes with that. Though you may profess to be a certain thing, does not mean that you are that. Your actions will show that. Just like they say, actions speak louder than words. Your actions will go places that your words can't. So the question then becomes, what is the self-identity crisis that we speak of when we speak about trauma? When we have warped perspectives. So a lot of times when we look back at certain situations, because it happened to us, we may begin to think that that's the way it always is, but it's not the case. Sometimes you can look at situations from your perspective, but then if you get an outside perspective, it then opens you up, or you can either strengthen or ground you in the perspective that you already had. When you deal with religion or you deal with religious people, um, if you're not in the business of converting anyone into anything, you can become open to listening to their perspective. Hearing their perspective will either reassure you in what you already believe or cause you to ask questions to do further research to either change what you believe or get further deeper into your beliefs. The next thing to look at then would be the question, do I truly believe this, or is this based off of something that I've been through? Is this based off of something that I've been told? Is this based off of what I've seen other people experience? Is it really the truth? Is it really a fact, or is it just a truth? Is it something that I can perceive and believe, or is it something that I can prove? So that's a lot of times trauma allows us to look at things just from one angle. We don't get to see the entire scope. We just see it from what affects us. But we got to open our minds up. That's why the mindset that I have is consider the three P's: peace, positivity, and perspective. Perspective being the biggest and the last pillar, because as you begin to grow, as you begin to communicate with other people, you begin to consume different forms of information. You broaden your perspective so you don't focus in on just how it affects you. You're able to see how things affect other people as well, so that you're able to grow and be a better service to others. So let's look at the next part of that, which is drama. I know in our particular culture, we are the biggest consumers of entertainment, of food, of everything. We're the biggest consumers in the world. So when it comes to drama, a lot of times the things that we look at as far as entertainment is our biggest um, leading or biggest influence that we have on our growth. If we consume negativity on a regular basis, 9 times out of 10, we're going to begin to act negative. We're going to begin to think negative. So again, drama distracts the lazy and the productive in the same way. But the difference between the two is is the drama consuming them, or are they consuming the drama? So we all, the saying that I have is, what, two people wake up every day. There's a doer and a dreamer. One does what they dream about, and the other one dreams about what they want to do. The difference between you and the next person that has the same idea that you have is that execution. So if you're not willing to execute, then what is the point of having the dream? Other than that, we're just wishing. So how does that correlate to drama? If we're constantly consuming drama, then we then narrow our perspective to only see the drama. We only see the negativity. So do we believe that there are good people out here if we only see negative people? If we only see crime happening in the streets, we may be scared to go out in the streets because we think that that's what the world is, which is why you have to be careful about what you consume. It's okay to watch the news, but don't be consumed by the news. Because we could think about the pandemic for one. If you get consumed with what everyone is saying, you then become misinformed because you don't have anything to ground yourself on. So it turns into a situation where you get into a state of not making any decision. You don't make any action because you don't know what to rely on, because you haven't grounded yourself on your own perspective or your own vantage point. So we have to be careful because, again, drama is something that is pushed on us on a constant basis. Trauma is something that is pushed on us on a regular and constant basis, not just in the state of our own trauma, but things are put in front of us to trigger our trauma so that we can continue to consume the drama. It all goes together. If if media knows that when you see a negative situation on TV is going to drive you to go buy a t-shirt, then I'm going to continue to drive this media in front of you so that you buy more t-shirts. So if we understand that's how the game is being played that we're playing, then we have to get out of the rat race and ground ourselves on a perspective that's more positive. If we're stuck in a space of no growth, then we have to look at what are we doing and what are we not doing. What are we consuming? What are we not consuming? Because 9 times out of 10, we're looking for balance somewhere, but a lot of times the balance just comes from our inaction. A lot of times we get stuck in our mind, but we don't actually execute. We don't actually do anything with our hands. We don't move. So, and vice versa, we can be doing a lot of movement, but we're not actually doing anything. We're actually just moving a lot. So we just want to be conscious of what are we consuming and what have we been through in the past that is causing us to be where we are now. Most drama is unrelated to the observer or distracted person. A lot of times, and that goes back to the news, is we look at things uh, from just our vantage point. We look at situations from what the camera sees. We don't look at it from the standpoint of what's behind the camera, what took place before the camera came on, what took place after the camera went off. We only see one perspective. So that's why expanding your perspective is so important as well. So the next thing as well is that entertainment is sold with trauma and drama. How long has it been since you've been entertained or consumed with entertainment compared to education? So I have these notes here because I sat here and tried to think about how to break down the correlation between trauma and drama. And is there really a difference? A lot of trauma comes from drama. A lot of times we see things on the news. I know for me personally, I try not to watch too much fighting or too much damage that happens to people um, on my phone or on TV, because I empathize with those people, and then I begin to feel for them more than I feel for myself. I begin to look around and begin to feel sorry for individuals that I don't know the situation, don't know what took place, what resulted into it. And then I take on that emotional baggage. I'm constantly feeding in all of this emotional baggage. And then I don't know what else to do with it. So then it turns into pushing it on other people. It turns on pushing it onto your work. It turns to pushing it onto your relationships, your friendships, your creativity. So all of it has a effect to us. Everything that we do is either helping us grow or stunning our growth. So it's up to us in order to decipher between the two and then take intentional action in order to go forward. So looking at how you learn, how you study, how you deal with relationships, how you deal with money, how you deal with people in life is directly connected to the trauma in our past and our consumption of drama in our present day. Grounding ourselves and understanding that it's not that we don't that you don't like it, is that you don't like the way it makes you feel, helps you move past what happened in your past. So what that particular point brings out is that many times we get comfortable, and then when it's time to get uncomfortable so we can grow, we have negative associations with that growth. um, and sometimes it's not the actual thing that we're changing, it's the way that getting uncomfortable feels that stops us from growing or stops us from moving forward. So we have to work at replacing that negative association with a positive association. Take that negative thought, transform it into a positive thought, or at least replace it with a positive thought, so that we don't give room for our minds to put ourselves back into the comfort zone. A lot of times that these things can be fixed with just having a routine. If you can just give yourself a routine to busy yourself in the times that you may have these negative thoughts, have these traumatic triggers, have these times where you may be consuming too much. If you build a routine that prevents you from consuming it, at that point you eliminate or diminish the power that that negative thought or that negative situation or that trigger has over you. So grounding yourself on the understanding that it's not that you don't like it or the physical thing or the action, but it's that you don't like the way it makes you feel is what helps you move past trauma that happened to you in the past. And then lastly, drama enables excuses to dismiss your trauma. The reason for you to reason that you are attracted to drama is due to the pacifying of trauma. What does that mean? Typically, when you watch, let's see, typically when you consume drama, you think about what would you do in that situation, or how would you feel in that situation, how the parties involved feel in the situation. It then becomes a form of entertainment, which then correlates back to a trauma bond that you then connect with people that you don't know. So this is now excessive emotional activity, excessive emotional baggage that we take on um, haphazardly, involuntarily, sometimes voluntarily, because we're choosing to consume it. But we're taking on this emotional baggage and then expressing it out. Energy doesn't die. Everything that has to do with energy starts and finishes with energy. Energy can't go anywhere, it can only transform into another purpose. So that being said, as we consume negativity, that negativity must go somewhere. It can't just disappear. It doesn't just vanish into thin air. It must be projected or transmuted into something else. So we have to be careful what we consume, because what we consume must be expelled from us. So what do we do with that emotional baggage when we're done with it? What do we do with negative situations when we're done with them? What do we do with positive energy? What do we do with positive situations that happen to us? Do we treat them the same way as we do with negative situations? A lot of these things we have to think about, because again, trauma and drama in your development is very key. They all go together. Again, we are the most traumatized. We are the biggest consumers of drama, entertainment, and all types of consumer goods. But what are we doing with that? If we have the biggest spending power, what are we spending that money on? Is it on education? Is it on development? Is it on becoming valuable? Is it turning yourself into an asset? Is it making yourself a better person? Or is it just contributing to your failures? Is it contributing to your weaknesses? Is it contributing to your trauma? Is it just eating away at your value versus adding value to you? That's something to think about. So that's what we're doing here today. This was kind of brief here. I just wanted to test this out. We're going to try to go live more on YouTube. We're going to go live more on Instagram. This is the Silent Conversations podcast live edition. So again, tap in. It's your brother Silent Sound. As always, is peace, positivity, and perspective. As always, these episodes and this podcast is brought to you by the Silent Store, where you can get my ebook on how to have a better day. That's the 3 P's, the keys to having better days. We all ask that question. How was your day? How was your day? But do we genuinely answer these questions from the heart and how we genuinely feel? Do we feel like we really had a bad day? The question is, what is a bad day? How bad really was your day if you made it through it? If you woke up, how bad can your day really get? Let's think about that. A lot of the things that happens to us isn't always a negative. A lot of times it's building character, it's building a resolve in us so that we can be better for the next day, or be better for the next person, so that they can get up off their feet and inspire the next one. If self-development is key, because self-development is the first step to community development. If I'm working on myself, just like Michael Jackson said, I'm working on the man in the mirror, asking him to change his ways. So you have to ask yourself every day, what am I doing in order to become better for myself, which then makes me better for others? So as always, peace, positivity, and perspective. As always, seek peace first. Always think about the positive before the negative, and always expand your perspective. The broader your perspective, the broader your growth, the broader your range of potential can be. So as always, think, learn, grow. If you're thinking, you're able to learn. If you're learning, you're growing. Anything that's alive is growing, and anything not growing is dead. As always, limit your excuses, not your abilities, and tap in before you tap out. That's your brother, Silent Sound. Peace. Let's close this on YouTube. Appreciate y'all, YouTube.